Akashvani Mangaluru presents Voices from the Bookshelf in collaboration with Bookaholics Mangaluru. Dear listeners, welcome to today's episode of Voices from Bookshelf. Let us lend our ears to Akanksha Girish Pai, who is speaking about the book Into the Wild by John Krakauer in the genre of travel and memory.
I now walk into the wild. Those words, scribbled in the margins of a book, were some of the last ever written by a young man named Christopher McCandless, a man who abandoned society in search of raw, unfiltered experience, only to perish in the wilds of Alaska. But what compelled him to walk away from his life, his family, and even his name? That's the haunting question that John Krakauer seeks to answer in his compelling non-fiction narrative, Into the Wild. Over the next few minutes, let's unravel this unforgettable story, not just of a person, but of an idea of freedom, of idealism, and ultimately of tragedy. Imagine abandoning everything, your money, your family, even your name, to chase an idea of freedom so pure, so wild that it costs you your life. That's not the plot of a novel. That's a real-life story, and Into the Wild takes us deep into that journey. It's a haunting, beautifully crafted non-fiction narrative that blends adventure, philosophy, tragedy, and a raw exploration of what it means to truly live and die on your own terms. If you've ever felt the itch like me to escape society, to go off the grid, to just disappear, or to seek some unspoiled truth about yourself in the wilderness, this book is going to pull you in like a magnetic force. I'm Akanksha Pai from Bookaholics Mangalore, and I'll be reviewing Into the Wild under the genre travel and memoir. Because this is a bit of both and neither. In fact, perhaps it's a bit philosophical. So the story. Chris McCandless was not your average young man. He was born into a wealthy family. He graduated from Emory University in 1990. His parents were proud, his future was bright. But Chris had different plans. He gave away his $24,000 to charity, cut off all communications with his family, and set out on a journey across America, all alone. He hitchhiked, camped, worked odd jobs, and read voraciously, especially writers like Jack London, Thoreau, and Tolstoy. Their romantic portrayals of nature and self-reliance deeply influenced him. He called himself Alexander Supertramp, as if to shed off the skin of the man that he used to be. After nearly 2 years of wandering, Chris ventured into the Alaskan bush in 1992. Armed with a .22 rifle, a bag of rice, a field guide, and not much else, he lived in an abandoned bus, the now famous Magic Bus. It's a real spot in Alaska. You can go visit it if you choose to. 4 months later, his body was found there, weighing just 67 pounds. Krakauer approaches this story like a detective and less like a writer. In fact, he also has some personal stakes in it because he himself is an avid outdoorsman. He pieces together Chris's path through interviews, letters, postcards, and journals. He retraces Chris's steps from the Mojave Desert to the wheat fields of South Dakota and to the Salton Sea. Each stop reveals a layer of the man, his brilliance, his intensity, his kindness, his stubbornness, and sometimes one wonders, perhaps his foolishness. What Krakauer uncovers is more than the tale of a young man who got lost. It's a psychological profile, a philosophical inquiry, and at times a personal confession. Krakauer admits that he saw some of Chris in his own youthful adventures. In one chapter, he describes his own near-death climb up to the Devil's Thumb in Alaska. That inclusion is controversial. Some people believe that Krakauer hijacks the narrative for his own benefit, and other people say that it deepens it. I personally enjoyed it because I too am a rock climber and enjoy the outdoors, so seeing that personal narrative tied in with Chris's story showed me that much more of how all of us are vulnerable to nature. It's about that part of us that yearns to escape, to test ourselves, and to find meaning in the rawness of nature. So what are the broad themes that this book is based on? Let's talk about what it really is about. At its core, it's a meditation on idealism versus realism. Chris was a staunch idealist, almost to a fault. He rejected capitalism, consumerism, material comfort, and even relationships to some extent. He sought something purer, a life without artifice. He wasn't running away from something, he was running towards something. As Krakauer writes, he wants to kill the false being within. He was seeking truth, authenticity, and grace. But nature doesn't bend to our ideals. It doesn't care if your motives are pure or your ideals align with it. Nature is indifferent, it is brutal, and it is always unforgiving. And that's the tragedy. Chris might have had the right idea, but he had the wrong preparation. His journey wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. And like many pilgrims, he did not survive the pilgrimage. Now let's turn to a deeply emotional part of the book. Chris's relationship with his family. He left them without as much as a word. To his parents, he simply vanished. That act, no matter how noble his motives were, was painful. His younger sister Karin, who loved him dearly, was devastated. When Krakauer interviews his family, especially in later editions, we see people grappling with grief, guilt, and a desperate need for closure. Chris was not heartless. He was conflicted, like many of us are. He was someone seeking his own identity and believed that perhaps losing himself in the wild was the only way to find himself. He resented his father's controlling nature, his parents' obsession with appearances, coming back to the point that he was from a wealthy family, and the secrets that had been kept from him. But he also carried immense emotional burden, a burden that he tried to set down in the wilderness. Coming to the style and structure of the book, Krakauer writes with both precision and lyric. His journalistic style doesn't just present facts, it evokes feelings, and I feel this relates back to the fact that Krakauer put an own anecdotal experience into the book, and that had more of an emotional stake for him. He structured the book into fragments, echoing the way Chris's story was pieced together after his death. We often jump back and forth in time, and this can be quite taxing mentally, especially since this book is so emotionally taxing as well. We hear from park rangers, from farmers, drifters, and wanderers, all people that Chris met along the way. Each person adds a perspective. Some admired him, and others called him foolish. Some even cried when they heard what happened. The author doesn't force you to love or to hate Chris. He simply dissects him. One of the central mysteries of Into the Wild was what killed Chris McCandless. At first, it seemed like starvation. Then perhaps he ate the wrong plant. Krakauer proposes a theory involving Hedysarum alpinum, the wild potato plant, which may have contained a toxic compound or mold that blocked his metabolism. But in a way, the precise cause doesn't change the tragedy. What matters is that loneliness of the final note found in his journal. Quote, "I have had a happy life and thank the Lord. Goodbye and may God bless all." Unquote. There's something achingly beautiful in those words. He was only 24 years old, alone, perhaps finally at peace. Some critics call Chris arrogant, reckless, privileged, a boy playing wilderness hero and paying the ultimate price. Others see him as brave, a seeker, a kind of modern-day mystic. I think the author's genius lies in showing us that both views can coexist. Chris was reckless, but he was also compassionate. He was naive, but also deeply thoughtful. A paradox, just like many of us. And perhaps that's why this book has lasted. It doesn't offer answers, it invites questions. Who are we when we strip away the roles that society assigns us? What does it mean to be free? And is true solitude a path to enlightenment or a road to ruin? So why should you read Into the Wild? Because it's not just a book, it's an experience. It's a long look at a short life that forces you to ask, what do I value? What am I running from or towards? What does it mean to live deliberately? It's not preachy, and it's not black and white. In keeping true to its cover, in fact, this book actually thrives in the grays. It's a kaleidoscope of ideas, and Krakauer gives you the space to find your own perspective, whether you see Chris as a martyr, a misfit, or a modern romantic. You'll come away changed, because I did too. You'll feel something, and that's what great literature does. It stirs you up. Also, let's be real, it's just a great story. Imagine road trips, deserts, hitchhiking, rivers, solitude, snowstorms, mystery. It reads like a novel, but every word is true. And for those of you who prefer the audiovisual medium, it's one swell movie too, directed by none other than Sean Penn. If you know, you know. And it's not like other travel memoirs, because really, it's no memoir at all. Chris's story lives in that bus in Alaska, in those he abandoned and in those he met. It's a living memoir, a breathing story. In his great quest to find authenticity in the wilderness, Chris forgot man's quintessential need to be social, to see our lives lived through the eyes of others, and to see time pass in others. So Into the Wild isn't just a story, it's a mirror. It reflects our yearnings, our doubts, our idealism, and our fragility. Chris McCandless lives on because his story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about risk, meaning, and the cost of freedom. As Krakauer writes in the final lines, it is hardly unusual for a young man to be drawn to a dream. What makes Chris's story so compelling is that he tried to live out his dream and the dream killed him. And maybe, just maybe, in his death, he taught us how to live. So pick up this book, Go Into the Wild.
You were listening to Akanksha Girish Pai, who is speaking about the book Into the Wild by John Krakauer in the genre of travel and memory. This is today's Voices from the Bookshelf. See you next episode.